The dragon drifted silently through the emptiness of space, his enormous body coiled like a shadow around the glowing star. His scales were dark and broken with age, once bright as silver fire, now dulled by time. His name was Veilthar, though no one alive remembered it. There was no one left who could. A long time ago his kind had ruled the stars. They had been feared and admired, creatures so powerful that fleets of warships bent to their will. To some they were gods. To others monsters. But time, like an endless tide, washed away even the greatest of empires. The other dragons were gone now, burned away in wars, swallowed by black holes, lost to the same universe they once tried to control. Veilthar had outlived them all. And he was tired. He looked at the red giant below him, its surface boiling and trembling as if ready to collapse. It was an old star close to death. He had chosen this place carefully. If he pushed it just a little further, if he unleashed the full weight of his power, the star would fall in on itself. It would explode with such fury that whole systems would vanish. Planets, moons, entire civilizations, it would all burn with him. And to Veilthar that seemed fitting. A final roar. A last strike against the silence of eternity. The thought gave him a strange kind of peace. He had carried the weight of ages, memories of victories and betrayals, of cities turned to dust and allies long forgotten. What was left for him now but silence? If he was to die, why not make the universe remember? Why not leave behind a scar so deep that even the stars themselves could not forget him? And yet, in the long stillness before his act, something restless moved in him. He wondered, just for a moment, what it would feel like to end not as a destroyer but simply as someone who was tired. Someone who wanted rest. He quickly pushed the thought aside. Mercy was for weaker creatures. He was the last of his kind and he would die as the legends told, with fire. He shifted his wings, each movement shaking the space around him, and lowered his head toward the dying star. The heat brushed across his ancient scales but it did not hurt him. No fire could, not anymore. He opened his jaws slowly, preparing to release the fury that still lived in him, a storm of power strong enough to break a sun. But before he could, something caught his eye. A faint flicker of light, moving clumsily near the edge of the star's glow. It was tiny, almost invisible compared to his vast shape, and yet it was there, alive, struggling. A ship, small and broken, fighting against gravity it could never hope to escape. For the first time in centuries, Veilthar hesitated. The small ship shuddered as it dragged itself into the system, flames trailing behind it like the tail of a dying comet. The hull was cracked in places, engines coughing out uneven bursts of power. Inside, Captain Daniel Brooks sat strapped to his chair, sweat running down his face as sparks jumped from the controls in front of him. The alarms had been screaming for an hour, but now they were fading to a weak hum, almost as if the ship itself had given up. Daniel knew there was no one to hear his distress calls. The signal blinked faintly, scattering into the emptiness of space. He was too far from the nearest colony, too far from trade routes. Even if someone picked it up, help would arrive days too late. His ship had minutes at best. Still he kept sending the calls. Old habits were hard to break, and Daniel had been a captain long enough to know you never stop trying no matter how small the chance. As the failing ship drifted close to the star, its shadow fell across something far larger. The dragon noticed him. Veilthar turned his ancient head, one eye opening like a burning world, and saw the fragile machine struggling in his presence. Compared to the size of his body, the ship was nothing more than a spark, something he could crush without effort. He waited for the sound he always expected, the begging, the pleading, the desperate voice of a creature who wanted more time. But the voice that came surprised him. Daniel's transmission crackled through the static. His tone was steady, calm, almost conversational. "Well," he said, adjusting the controls though he knew it was useless. "If this is my last hour, I'll spend it talking. Someone should hear a story. Doesn't matter if it's only the stars listening." There was no fear in his words. No trembling, no bargains, no anger. Just a man speaking as if death had already shaken hands with him and he had chosen to keep his dignity. Veilthar listened, curious despite himself. For thousands of years, he had heard humans in their ships scream when they faced him. He had seen their weapons fire hopelessly, their cries echo across the void. But this one did not scream. He simply began to talk. Daniel leaned back, letting the dead controls flicker as he spoke into the comms. He told simple things. How his father had built wooden boats back on Earth and taught him to love the ocean, how his crew would always hum a song while repairing the engines, how the stars looked different when you were a child lying on the grass instead of a captain sitting in metal. His voice was soft, tired, but carried a strange warmth. The dragon curled tighter around the star and listened. He expected begging. Instead, he heard stories of a world that smelled of rain, of people who laughed and worked and dreamed. And for the first time in many centuries, Veilthar did not feel like a god or a monster. He simply felt curious. Daniel kept talking, his voice low but steady, as if he were sharing secrets with the night sky. He spoke of the ocean back on Earth, how it smelled of salt and carried the cries of gulls across the wind. He described standing on the shore as a boy, feeling the pull of waves tugging at his legs, and how endless the horizon seemed when you were small. Veilthar listened, his huge body coiled around the star, his single eye glowing in the dark. For so long he had drifted through the void, thinking of nothing but endings. He had seen stars born and planets broken, but never had he thought of oceans. Never had he cared for the sound of children laughing as they chased something as fragile as a wave. Daniel's voice softened when he spoke of his sister, Emily. She was a painter who loved sunsets more than anything. He said she painted them over and over again, each one different, because she was afraid she wouldn't live long enough to see them all. She told me once, Daniel said, that every sunset feels like the last one you'll ever get. That's why you can't waste it. You sit with it. You let it burn in your memory. The dragon's chest rumbled, not with anger, but with something he hadn't felt in centuries. His kind had never cherished small moments like that. They had measured life in victories, in the burning of worlds, in the endless hunger for power. To hear a man speak of sunsets as treasures, it was strange, almost foolish. And yet, it held a weight Veilthar could not dismiss. At last he broke the silence. His voice was deep, echoing across the calms like thunder rolling through empty valleys. How do you endure it? He asked. Knowing everything you love will die? Knowing the ocean will dry, the paintings will fade, the laughter will stop? How do your kind bear such a truth without breaking? For a moment Daniel didn't answer. The ship crackled, another alarm flickered weakly, but still he sat calmly in the chair, staring at the failing star's cape before him. When he finally spoke, his words were quiet, almost fragile. That's why we love it harder while it's here. Veilthar stilled. The reply struck him like no blade ever could. Love harder while it's here. The idea twisted in his mind. His kind had ruled with fear, with fire, with force that bent whole galaxies. But never had they loved anything except themselves. They had sought eternity in power, only to find it slipping from their claws. He thought of his kin long dead. He thought of his own endless existence, filled with silence. And for the first time he wondered if he had been the one who was truly small all along. The human's voice drifted again, gentle against the roaring star. We don't fight the ending, Daniel said. We just make the middle worth it. And in that moment the ancient dragon's memories stirred, not of war, not of conquest, but of a life he had never lived. The star beneath them groaned, its surface twisting and boiling like a great wound. Streams of fire shot out, curling into space as if the sun itself was crying out in pain. Veilthar could feel it unraveling. With only a push from him, only a spark of his own ancient power, the star would collapse. The blast would tear across the system, bright enough to light the galaxy for a moment, violent enough to erase whole civilizations. He had waited for this. For centuries he had imagined the end, not a quiet fading into nothing, but a roar that the universe could never forget. He wanted the stars themselves to carry his final cry. His claws flexed, his chest burned, and yet he did not move. Because the human's words still lingered. Daniel's voice was weaker now. His ship was breaking apart around him, and blood stained his sleeve where a jagged panel had torn into his arm. He should have been begging for rescue, shouting for someone to save him. But instead, he kept speaking into the silence, his voice carried on through failing comms. He was not asking for his own life. He spoke of the billions who lived around nearby stars. He spoke of families who had never even heard of him, people who would never know his name. And still he asked for them. A dying man, already lost, still begged for strangers. You don't have to do this, Daniel whispered. If that star falls, they fall with it. People who never harmed you. Children who've never even seen war. Don't take them just because you're tired. The words struck deep, sharper than any weapon Veilthar had faced. The dragon had watched empires rise and fall, had destroyed fleets that dared to challenge him. He had never once hesitated, never once doubted that strength meant destruction. Yet this fragile voice, soft and human, made him question. Was this not another kind of power? To think beyond yourself, beyond your pain? To give value to lives you would never meet, to protect those who would never even know you existed? Veilthar turned the thought over like a stone in his claws. His kind had never cared for such things. They had sought dominion, they had craved eternal remembrance, and in the end they had destroyed themselves. But this human, wounded, fragile, ready to die, still spoke for others. Not for glory. Not for himself. Simply because he cared. The dragon felt something unfamiliar, something almost uncomfortable: doubt. For the first time in millennia, the certainty that had fueled him cracked. He looked down at the burning star, the collapse waiting for his command. And he looked at the tiny ship, its lights flickering, its captain breathing in shallow gasps, still speaking through the static. The choice weighed on him heavier than any battle he had ever fought. Veilthar's roar shook the emptiness of space, a sound so deep it felt like the heartbeat of a dying galaxy. His massive wings spread wide, stretching farther than any planet could hold, and the glow from the star below reflected off his scales like molten metal. For centuries he had imagined this moment, imagined the fire and chaos he could unleash. But now, as he looked down at the fragile human ship struggling in the star's light, everything inside him shifted. Instead of crushing the star, instead of unleashing the full fury he had carried for millennia, Veilthar did something he had never done before. He poured his own strength into the heart of the sun, letting the energy of his ancient body flow into it. His scales flared brighter than any star in the system, like embers falling from a dying fire, and he felt his life burning away in a way that was both painful and beautiful. Every beat of his immense heart became a pulse of life for the collapsing star. The red giant shuddered, twisted, and then began to steady. The boiling flames calmed, the violent eruptions softened, and slowly the star's surface glowed with steady, golden light. Daniel's ship floated safely in that light, shaken but unharmed. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. The star that had been ready to destroy everything had been saved. And in the middle of it all, the dragon was gone, leaving behind only sparks of fading light drifting in the void. Daniel's hands trembled as he reached for the comms. His voice cracked as he recorded a final log, his words simple but heavy with awe. "The last dragon chose mercy," he said, staring at the soft, golden glow of the star. He could have destroyed everything. He could have ended it all. And yet he chose to protect. Let us be worthy of it. Veilthar's form shimmered and faded, the last of his life dissolving into the star he had saved. For centuries he had been a destroyer, feared and dreaded by all who knew his kind. But in his final act he became something else entirely, a guardian. Not a god, not a weapon, not a creature of wrath, but a being who chose kindness over power. In that choice he left a legacy that no warship, no empire could ever match. The dragon's sacrifice echoed in the quiet of space, a reminder that even the oldest, strongest, most feared beings could learn something new. And Daniel, floating in the calm glow of the star, understood it in a way he would never forget. Life was fragile. Life was fleeting. And yet, sometimes the smallest acts, spoken words, a simple choice to protect instead of destroy, could ripple across the universe in ways no one could measure. Veilthar was gone, but his story remained. And in that story humans found hope, not because they were stronger or faster, but because they could choose to care, even when the odds seemed impossible.